Frederic has shown you everything that the CC can offer you, and I'm going to talk about what we expect from you, what you can do for us, because actually we need you to help us help you. The reason is that the number of CC users is pretty large. So we have currently approximately 1,400 active accounts. So this number is pretty stable since a few years ago. But this is a large amount compared to the pool of administrators. So basically, there's a little dozen of us to manage the cluster and answer all your questions. I'd just like to restate our goals. So the goals of the CC administrators is to provide as much uptime as possible for the CC infrastructure. And here I mention, among others, because most of us, if not all of us, have other duties to attend to. We are not only working on the CC clusters, but on other infrastructures in the universities. Our goal is always to accommodate the widest spectrum of jobs. So we try to make sure that every application is able to run on the cluster. And our duty is to maximize the resource utilization. We cannot afford wasting resources. And we do everything we can to maximize or minimize the turnaround for your job, so make sure that your job starts as soon as possible. So how can you help us? 3 ways. First, by playing along with others. Second, by preparing your interactions with us, and having high standards for yourself. What do I mean by playing along with others? The first thing to know is that there are rules for using the clusters. So the clusters are IT equipment, and every university has rules using the IT equipment. And we have specific rules also for the CC. And basically, the main rule is do not harm security of the system. So you will have secrets to allow you to connect to the clusters. These are strictly personal. You are not allowed to share them or to copy them to other systems. And those rules exist just to make sure that everyone's data is safe and secure. Second thing is that we need you to actually read our emails. So we send a few dozen emails a year. When we do, it's because we have an objective, a real meaning. So we don't send them for entertainment. So please read them. They always contain important information. Often also information about events like users' days. It's very important that you attend those users' days, and we also organize quality surveys, and it's very important also that you answer those surveys, because it's data that we can use to ask funding for the clusters. So there is no recurrent funding for the CC cluster. So every year or couple of years, the CC Bureau, and the representative of the users and the administrators need to write submissions for funding, and we can have arguments for that funding if we can show that many people have answered the survey and are happy about what we do, and if many people come to the training session like you or to the CC user day. Also very important for this is to acknowledge the use of the CC clusters in your application. So on the website, there are ready-made sentences that you can use. Please also be thoughtful of others. You are sharing a common computer, and there are workflows or way of working that create issues for every other users. So I'm not going to detail them now, because at this point in time, you might not understand all the phrases, the sentences, but I can promise you that by the end of all training sessions, you will understand everything there, and remember that it's not a good thing to do. Also important is to not waste resources. For that, you need to prepare your job to make sure that they are running correctly. It's important to test small versions of the job and try to go bigger and bigger in increments. It's important to note that a high-performance computer that is running, that is sitting idle, still consumes half the energy that it's using when it's running. So it's not the kind of computer that goes to sleep mode and like your laptop does not use energy anymore. If it's running, doing nothing, it still consumes half the energy it's using if it's running computation. So it's important that the compute nodes are either fully used or completely shut down. And as we never shut them down, it's important that when you request resources, you actually use the resources. So this is just what I said. And the fact that we are all sharing the equipment makes it important that everyone cooperates in the same direction. Second thing that we need from you is to prepare your interactions with us. So at some point in time, you will have a problem and you will ask us for help. And we need you to follow some steps in order to make sure that we don't lose time and spend time doing useless research. The first thing is to start with your due diligence. So most of the time, the problem will arise in the form of an error message. Don't be afraid of those error messages and have the courage to read them. So it can be something like blah, 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 you don't understand, but then all of a sudden there can be a sentence that you understand, like here, find not found. You can understand that sentence. It means that the solution is just this line. So it's important that you actually read the error messages and try to find, not to understand everything, but try to find the bits that you can understand in the error message. Second, if you still did not find the solution, please use the correct channel to contact us. So on the CSE website, there's a support form which will help you to be directed to the correct person depending on the cluster, because it's important to note that we share the clusters, but we do not have administrator root access to every cluster. So I am from UC Louvain. I have administrator access to the UC Louvain cluster, so Le Maître Fort, but I do not have access on Frédéric's cluster here. So if your problem requires administrative access, you need to ask the correct person. Never send an email directly to some admin that you know, because first it's compartmentalized. I need to train saying that word. So it compartmentalizes the information. And second, you're never sure that that person will be available at that time. So when you send an email to someone who is on vacation, it takes longer to get an answer than if you actually go through the correct form. Third tip is to state the general goal. It's important to explain what you are trying to achieve, what you are trying to do, not only the problem that you had. So give us the last view on what you are trying to achieve, because most of the time, the fact that you face an issue can be indicative that you are not taking the right path. Or maybe you are going some detours and you are blocked here. And if you don't tell us that you need to go here, we cannot tell you that there's a small path here that would prevent you from facing that issue in the first place. So it's important to always say, I'm trying to do this. And in that process, I faced this issue. You need to provide all important information, because the information that we need to guess or discover is information that is a process that takes time, and we don't spend that time trying to find a solution. So it's better if you always specify your login, of course, what job ID, if you are talking about specific job that crashed, what files or modules that you have loaded, when it happened, which cluster, because we receive a lot of emails about, I have a problem with the cluster, but there are 5 of them and we don't know which one you are using. So it's always important to specify, I'm working on the LMS4 or I'm working on NIC5 and so on. And also be specific about the problem. Because I have a problem, I don't have a solution. If you give me a specific problem, I can find a specific solution. Talking about the problem, so as I mentioned earlier, most of the time the problem will arise under the form of an error message. It's important that you communicate that error message in full and to copy paste it and not make a screenshot of it. Okay, so in every terminal you can use, you can just select the text, copy, and then paste it in the email. Because I'm going to be honest, the first thing that we will do is copy paste that into Google to see what it means. So it's important that we can copy paste also the message. If you send us a screenshot or even a selfie, as we already got, it doesn't happen. The third thing that we are asking you is to have high standards for yourself. And there are certain tasks that you can do by yourself and maybe you don't realize it. But basically installing software, you can ask us to install software, but you can also do it by yourself. And there are training sessions here that will explain to you how to install software easily with just one command in a way that you can later choose the software that you have installed and even multiple versions and so on. Many items listed here are actually emails that we get and where we think, okay, they can do that by themselves. We are just losing time in them asking for us to do it and then us asking details because most of the time we don't have all the details and then giving the answer. So if you attend the training sessions, you will know how to do all of this by yourself. And there is something that is very important that you must do is take responsibility for the backups. Because actually we don't have sufficient infrastructure to organize backups for the clusters. So you can have a copy of the data on the clusters, but it must not be the only copy you have. So it's always better to have a copy of your data locally in your department or your office or whatever, and then have a copy on the clusters. It's important that you learn also the basics before using the clusters. So most of the sessions in the training sessions are already pretty introductory, but every year we have users that complain that the sessions are not introductory enough. So there's still some basic stuff that you need to know before you attend the sessions. And it's basically the basics of operating systems, the basics of using a command line interface, and the basics of programming. I will just cover those quickly. So I'm sure you all know Windows. This is one type of operating system, and you see in the figure here, there are three main families of operating systems. So Windows, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Mac OS and iOS for those who have Mac. This is a second branch, and the clusters are running the operating system in the third branch, which is GNU and Linux. So the good news is that if you have an Android phone or a smart TV or smart car or anything, most of the time it will be running Linux, not exactly the same Linux as we have on the clusters. But it's important that you understand that we are running Linux, and if you have a program that runs on Windows, it will never run on the cluster. It's important to note. So if Linux is entirely new to you, I can suggest that you read this link. It's a 5-minute link read. It addresses all the basics, and you have links to further documentation in there. So just before you attend next sessions, if you have never learned anything about Linux, you can read that article. It's pretty well written. So the operating system, in our case Linux, is what sits between the hardware and the applications, and basically it allows accessing the files, running commands, and basically there are two ways to interact with an operating system. The first one is via the desktop, and the second one is via the terminal. The difference between both is that the desktop has colors and the terminal has not, or basically is mostly black. So this is what you are used to on your laptop and so on. You have an environment where you can click on icons and menus. But if you connect to the clusters, what you will get is this very dark and intimidating interface. It should not be intimidating. Basically, the way it works is that there's a program running in there. It's called a shell. And basically, to interact with the shell, we type simplified commands, and then we press the enter key, we wait a little bit, and then we get an answer. It's very much like when you text with someone, you write your message, you hit send, you wait for the answer, and the answer is printed on the screen just below. It's exactly the same, and you can rinse and repeat with multiple commands. On the clusters, Frederick mentioned the name of the shell is bash. So it's always nice to learn about bash before you use the clusters. And that will be the topic of the session this afternoon. So the shell gives you access to basic shell commands, but also to all the programs that are installed with the operating system. So there's a large set of command line utility that you can use on the clusters to manipulate files, to submit jobs, or to load modules, and so on. And it also offers a rudimentary programming syntax. So if there are tasks that you need to do repeatedly on the clusters, like renaming a large number of files, with the bash shell, you can do that programmatically rather than doing it file by file. If the notion of a terminal is entirely new to you, you can have a look at those two documents. In total, it will be a 15-minute read. It again addresses all the basics. If you have never read about the terminal, it explains what it does and how you start it on Windows or on Mac OS or Linux. And of course, it offers things to further learn about it. And I just mentioned programming earlier. So programming is about writing programs. And so taking an idea in your brain and making sure that it can be transferred as a program on the computers. So the computers understand this kind of stuff. Your brains thinks about this kind of stuff. And in between, you have a programming language which translates both. So programming is mostly about basic constructs like variables, conditionals, loops, and functions. And if you have no idea what I just said, it's time for you to read this little tutorial. In 10 minutes, it will explain to you the very basics that you need to know to be able to follow the next session in the training sessions. So in summary, please collaborate with each other so that we can maximize the amount of science per watt. Please prepare your interactions with us with the 5 steps I mentioned earlier, like do your due diligence, use the correct channel, state the general goal, give us all the important information, and give us also the exact error. And then try to prepare yourself correctly for using the clusters. And for all of that, we all thank you all in advance.